right, welcome back to All Hitches, NoVA's second podcast with Tom Horn. We're going right to it today, Mason. We got, we did our first episode talking all about the, transfers, new transfer rules, and now we're jumping into part two of the Tom Horn interviews, buddy.
Yes, if this was Rocky, we'd be defeating Apollo Creed for the championship. If this was part two, if we were Rocky, that we'd be going to defeat Apollo.
It is, and this being the proselytization episode where we talk all about recruiting, right? Because the first part was transfers, this part is recruiting, and you're right. Rocky 2 was a good movie, underrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this could be a good one too. Underrated.
Although I'm sure everyone's really going to be interested in again, a lot of questions. Can I get in trouble with the things I do? And I think a lot of those things get answered in this episode.
Yeah, I actually felt like a lot of these topics.
Yeah.
I don't know if for me, anyways, were more. I mean, transfers like, okay, is it a legal transfer or not? Do they move? Do they sell? Whatever. Whereas this one is like the one that's like, oh, is he training that guy? A lot of questions, a lot of convoluted stuff when it comes that people had questions about when it comes to specific, a student and a coach with a previous relationship.
Interaction with students who are not your own students, right?
Right. Any kind of that can be perceived as trying to get them to move or go to a different school, even if you're not trying to.
Right. So, a very interesting episode. I'm sure everyone's on bated breath, right? We're ready to hear about.
Oh, yeah, pins and needles for this one. So, all about recruiting, proselytization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A little bit of district talk at the end, talking about where they're going with the 6A and they're getting expanded with some of the Loudon teams. So it's kind of a fun little conversation here.
Absolutely. Gonna be really interesting.
All right.
Really good topics.
Yeah, here we go. Part 2 of the Tom Horn interview. All right, coming your way. Here we go. All right, welcome back.
So the other big thing that's on here that I think has been, and this is a nationwide problem. This is not just a Fairfax, is proselytizing, aka right? So this is a giant problem since the advent.
Word of the year. I was going to nominate that for Time Magazine Word of the Year.
That'd be
if we did a NoVA edition, right?
So
you have to be able to spell it though, Deck. You have to be able to spell it.
And I can't. I think I'll spell the wrong word if I spell it. Oh, you jerks! Come on.
So since travel ball started, right, this has become a large problem, especially in that world, right? Private trainers, travel ball has made this thing really tough.
Yeah.
So there are a few things I'd ask some questions on. One, coaches can't speak to students before they are officially enrolled. So how should coaches handle interest from rising ninth graders? How should they handle, how does that all work, right? I mean, they all have summer camps. So, for example, Woodson basketball has a really popular summer camp and tons of kids come for it, right? We have Coach Craig, who's a phenomenal basketball coach that kids want to.
A future Hall of Fame Coach Craig. I have a contract signed. I got to say that every time I say his name.
So just starting forward, how does that rule play?
Yeah. So Mace, I remember, and I'm going to show you how old I am, but I'm also going to tell you how old I am every chance I get so that everybody knows how old I am. When I took coaches education back in the 90s, it was an in-person 8-hour class on 2 separate Sundays, and the old school DSAs and coaches sat in front of you and they said, these are the rules. And one of the things that our old school coaches, those who are my age or approaching my age, will remember is that we had a script for all of those conversations. When someone calls you about your program, you say, I'll be happy to meet you after you enroll. And that's it. And it's a very short phone call. And they go, oh, yeah, but. And you go, I'll be happy to have these conversations after you enroll. It was always the rule. It's not a new rule, right? It was just it was better understood, better enforced. We practiced better habits in the 90s. Over time, with the proliferation of club sports and our own coaches being involved in those club sports, right? That script has broken down to the point where very few of us remember that script anymore. So we're going to reinvigorate the script because it still applies, because the rule hasn't really changed, right? If a parent calls you out of the blue to inquire about your program, you give them the number to the registrar in your building and you say, here's our boundary locator, find a home in our boundary, enroll in our school, and then come meet me the day after, or the minutes after you enroll. Sit in my office and I can give you all the info you need about our program. As a coach in the 90s, I looked forward to, and we, at George Mason, small school, right? We didn't get a lot of transfers, So then there's one that walked in the building. You're like, I need to recruit this kid. He's not here yet, but I need to talk to him about how great it would be if he were here. But we didn't have social media. You couldn't go on websites and look up the record, right? You didn't know how good the coach was or bad the coach was because you didn't even know the coach's name when you were walking the halls in the 90s. In 2025, people who call you out of the blue have already done the research. They've looked at your social media accounts. They've looked at your website. They've seen your name in Google, and they know whether you're a good coach or not. They're calling you because you are and because you have a successful program. And delay that conversation until they enroll in your school, and you won't be, at risk of violating the proselytizing rule. So that's the easy one. That's the phone call, the cold call out of the blue. The much harder one for our coaches to grasp is the running of camps, the working with private instruction, the running of summer teams. The basketball coaches, having an AAU program, baseball coaches with travel ball. All of those things are they're under the microscope more. Again, the rule hasn't changed. If an AAU coach was using his position as an AAU coach to induce the kid to move and change schools, it was always a violation of the rule, always. Now we just have a microscope on it. And now there's a blanket statement that says if you have that relationship, it is proselytizing. Like we don't have to.
But is that the conversation? Is that a conversation that needs to take place? Like to say what you just said,
to our coaches,
to my school, or can it just be, yeah, how's it going, Johnny? Looking good out there, to some kid that you happen to train. That's different, right? Like than saying, hey, do you want to come to this school?
Yeah, no, it's your relationship as the trainer creates the proselytizing should that kid arrive in your building. Okay. So, and that's a de facto. It's now a blanket, right? Like we don't have to vet. So in the past, what you might be thinking is I need a recording of that conversation, or I need a text message between the coach and the player, or I need the parent to say, well, I'm only here because coach said it was a great program. Now the relationship that existed before is the evidence of proselytizing. And it would be incumbent on the coach if charged with this, or the athlete, if their eligibility is in question because of it, to provide evidence to the contrary. I'm going to use two ends of the spectrum to kind of help our coaches understand this and not freak out about it. If you had a kid at your camp when he was in 3rd grade, right, and then he transfers to your building in 10th grade and you haven't talked to him in 7 years, nobody's going to accuse you of proselytizing if that's all the evidence we have. There's no proselytizing there. The kid's eligibility is not going to be in question, and the program and coach are not going to be sanctioned. But if you have a kid who moves into the area, doesn't live in your boundary, comes to your camp, and then finds his way into your building, all in a short period of time, you're going to have proselytizing concerns, right? And the kid's eligibility is going to be in question. So Coach Greg can have his summer camps, and he can invite as many people from around the areas we want. And we want him to educate all of those kids in the finer points of basketball. We want him to be amazing at those camps. And then we want him to send those kids back to where they live, and they can play for the coaches in the communities where they live, because that's always the Virginia High School League default. And that is the education-based athletic model. And that's the model that we have in Virginia. And that's the model that we follow in FCPS. So to use our position as a private instructor, a club coach, an AAU coach, to get kids to move to super programs is contrary to our mission and values. And if we don't agree with that, then don't coach in public schools, right? And certainly don't coach in FCPS. It's just not our mission. You can do great things following a different mission, but the education-based model that we follow in FCPS is educate all the kids that you have through your private facility, through your club teams, your AAU teams, and then give them to the community for 3 months and let them represent the town where they grew up in front of the fans that want to cheer for them, right? In front of the kids that they've gone to kindergarten with, and don't have them move to your school because of how great a coach you are. And I've used this example before. If you're lucky enough to work with a kid for 9 months in the off season and build this kid's talent, build their character, build their resilience, and then send them off for 3 months to watch it happen, that would be a great gift as a coach. I don't need that kid to be in my high school program, to take some joy in watching them develop and play for somebody else for 3 months. I would be thrilled that the work that I put in with that kid was showing up somewhere else. But anyway, that's more philosophical than rule. I didn't want to get there, but
go ahead. I mean, 20. Let me ask you specifically on that, because 27.9.1, right? And just kind of reading on the slides, at the bottom, It says, and I think this is what's freaking people out. And this is the one that I've gotten blown up on this
Yeah.
one, what you're talking about. So let's say the guy's doing all that, right? Just working with the kids, doing all that, but they don't come to his school. It says a clarification to this rule: student does not have to transfer for there to be a violation. So
Yeah.
I think that's the part that was confusing people, saying, well, I'm working with the guy. He's not coming to my school because he's not transferring. So am I in violation of it or not? So does that mean,
Yeah.
what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, because that language would speak to that earlier part where you say that side conversation that you're having, where you're not intending to work with them on their skills, you're trying to get them to move. So if parents were aware of these rules and the way they're supposed to be implemented, and they all knew that rule, then my hope is that if their private hitting instructor was like, hey, you need to come to school X next year because we have an opening at the position you play, that parent would pick up the phone and say, hey, this coach tried to induce a move, and it would be proselytizing, right? There was this, I'm gonna call it a belief in some circles that the kid had to actually enroll for there to be proselytizing. So the clarification that the league put in was, if you're recruiting kids and you're just not a good recruiter, you're still a proselytizer, right? And it's still not allowed. So good recruiters and bad recruiters treated equally here under this rule. If you try to induce the move, it is a violation. But providing instruction is not proselytizing. Trying to get him to move through your relationship as a private instructor would be proselytizing.
So I'm just curious.
That's huge.
What was the language that rule written to kind of discourage being like, okay, you can train, but just know if you're training some kid who goes to another school, there's going to be a heavy spotlight on you the whole time. So the child doesn't have to move. It just, all of a sudden, if the rumor comes and the kid was like, yeah, I think he was kind of talking to me about coming, I'm not sure, that all of a sudden there is a, like I said, giant spotlight on them. It's kind of like telling these trainers, watch out because we are watching what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and I have had, it doesn't sound like as many conversations as you all have had with coaches about this, but my phone's open, right? Anybody can call. And I have had several conversations. And the way I'm helping our AAU and our travel ball coaches, our private instructors, kind of get their head around this is, again, go back to the role that we have in education. Our job is to educate. So if I run a club, a club travel baseball program, then I'm going to have a parent meeting 3, 4, 5, 9 times a year, right? Because I know we have them all the time, right? Because they got to collect checks and they got to hand out uniforms and make sure they all have 3 bats, et cetera. They're going to have plenty of opportunity in front of parents. So what you do when you say, I'm a high school coach at this for 3 months a year, and for 9 months a year, I'm your travel coach. And my job is to get you ready for your high school program. And by playing for me in the summer, you are not going to become my high school player, right? Our job is to educate them on that. And if you have evidence that is the way you run your program, even malicious kids and families would have a difficult time charging you with proselytizing, right? Because everyone would say, oh no, he makes sure it's on the printed documents. There's waivers they sign. There's understandings. They've got the slideshow that they present at all the parent meetings. Like, they're covered, man. They're telling you that they can't come to my school. And again, we'll go back to the point of, we are educators. Let's educate, right? Let's help folks understand that choosing me as your private instructor means I won't be your high school coach, and that should be okay, right? I mean, and if it's not, yeah, good.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You finish your thought.
No, I was just going to say, and if it's not okay, again, there are other models. It's just not the Virginia public school model.
All right, so let's play out the average Joe scenario here, right? I'm coaching AAU basketball team, which, teaching the fundamentals of the 3-point shot, because I can shoot the lights out, that. And all of a sudden, little Johnny, and his mom loves me, dad loves me. I'm an irresistible guy. They just,
absolutely.
And I've been telling them, I said, Johnny, tell your mom you're not coming to my school. You're not coming to my school. And I told dad you're not coming. But again, they're like, no, Coach Dash is the best. We don't care what he says. We're going there. We're selling our house. They do that whole thing. They do they abandon, right? They do the whole abandon thing, and they come, even though I told them a million times not to. All right, how does that play out?
Yeah, so I'll jump to the end, and then we can go back through the steps that we go through. The kid's not going to be eligible. The coach is going to be fine, right? And it comes down to papering the trail. Can the coach demonstrate that that's the role that they took? They educated these folks, and will the parents acknowledge Yep, he told us we can't come here, but he's so good, we're coming anyway, and we're willing to sit for 365 days to have the pleasure and opportunity to play for this guy a year from now, and that's still okay under the Virginia High School League rules, right? That period of 365 is sort of an amnesty period, right? Where the kid comes in and says, he is my private instructor. I realize that there's a de facto athletic motive here in this move. I accept that, and I'm going to sit out for 365 days. And I'm going to say that the coach didn't have anything to do with me coming here, other than he's got charismatic personality, he's an amazing instructor, right? But I was also provided information in my relationship with him that told me I would be ineligible, and this coach never brought me here. I did this on my own. Statement like that from Joe Schmo's parent is going to keep the coach from concerns of proselytizing. It is going to affect the kid's eligibility, though.
Okay, so the kid's sitting out then, pretty much no matter what, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean,
okay.
the worst case scenario for the previous relationship kid who transfers into your building is that the kid sits out and the coach gets fired. Right? That's a possibility.
Wow.
The best case scenario for a previous relationship where the kid comes in is that there's plenty of evidence that this was not proselytizing, but there is an athletic connection. So the kid's going to sit out for a year and the coach is going to not be sanctioned because he hasn't done anything wrong. Right.
So another proselytizing rule, and maybe I missed it. Does anybody reaching out on behalf of your program count as proselytizing? So like if I have a parent and they reach out to somebody else, like, is there a limit? Is there go-betweens? Because in reality, 99.9% of all coaches are not going to try to find ways around the rules. But unfortunately, there are some coaches who may, right?
Absolutely, yep.
But
the old Goodfellas strategy, right? Big Tony tells his brother to make the phone call.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't say it.
Right.
So the interesting thing, you're very astute in reading these rules, right? So the proselytizing rule can result in sanctions against the coach, but more importantly, can result in sanctions against the program. Right. So if a third party, an intermediary, is the one who's inducing the move, using undue influence to get kids to change schools, then the program would be the one that gets sanctioned. Right. There's a world where the head coach actually has nothing to do with this. Right. But there's the community people and youth league coaches and club coaches that are funneling kids on behalf of the school. Okay. And the program would be sanctioned in that case. And again, so it becomes incumbent on the coach to know who's coming to your program and why. Right. The days of saying, I didn't know anything about it, didn't have anything to do with it, are gone. Right. Because head coaches are in very responsible positions. There's great authority and great responsibility to be a head coach at a public school. And one of them is that the circumstances that are driving kids to your program. If a coach who was not involved in proselytizing at all got wind that someone in the community was trying to wrangle up 3 new kids to come to this school next year, he should step in as an education professional and say that's not going to happen.
Okay.
So I'll ask the question I asked earlier with some of the transfer stuff. Is the proselytizing stuff, is that also kind of statewide? There's no differences or nuances with the way we're going to do it in other parts of the state?
That's exactly right. We, again, I give tons of kudos to the Virginia High School League staff. This is statewide microscope, all using the same language, no different standard for our coaches as anyone else, which allows for, parents who experience things, no matter where they experience it, to make inquiries at their school level. You take a Shenandoah Valley coach who is at a summer baseball tournament, he sees something that doesn't look right, or a kid was on this team in the summer and now all of a sudden that kid's changed schools out there on Route 81. I mean, they have the ability to say, hey, we know these rules and this doesn't look right. And now the school is responsible for looking into it.
Okay. Now I'll say this is the weird one though, the trainers and that kind of thing is where you might have this is probably pretty common in general. And I'm not saying it's all nefarious, but I'm just saying you have, a low level position coach on the roster, and he also trains guys. And it's easy when it's like the assistant coach that everyone knows, or the coach that everyone, but a low level guy, came from a, different part of the state or whatever. And now he's over there and he's bringing, and then, for whatever reason, kids have trained, come
Sure.
over, they get approved because they did it the right way, but maybe no one knows, or only a few people know, wait a minute, that one new young guy came over and that's where that guy came. How does that get reported? Like, is that only self-reported or could that guy's neighbor be like, hey, wait a minute, just some random dude call up the school? I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, all that. So the first thing that you said is, they met the rule, they did all the stuff. But remember, the third step in the transfer rule, 28871, is there an athletic motive to this move? So it is incumbent on the school and school division to look at that kid and say to that kid and that parent, do you have any connection to the existing coaching staff? And if they attest that they do not, and we find out later through some anonymous call that they did, then we'll rule the kid ineligible and we'll investigate the coach that was involved in the proselytizing, right? Again, I don't want to make it seem more matter of fact than it is, but that's just the way it will be, right? I mean, and it should have always been that way. We were just hyper focused. Now we will microscope focus on doing things exactly the right way across all 25. And again, I say across all 25 because that's who I work for. But my hope is that it's across all 318, right? That they're all taking the same responsibility for enforcing the rules we all agreed to play by.
Well, does everyone seem that way? Like, do all the Tom Horns of the state, right, in your position, do they all kind of, are you guys all on the same page? And, do you feel pretty confident about that?
I don't want to pause and then give anyone like, oh my gosh, he paused, but I paused. I mean, I believe everybody has it at their core, this education mission, and everybody who runs school divisions across the Commonwealth and run school athletic programs at their core believes in the rules. What we will test over the course of the next year or so is their courage, right? Do you have the courage to look at this community-based figure, this hero of yours who is a coach who's very successful maybe, and this program who drives a lot of interest in your community? Do you have the courage to enforce the rules in that environment? And again, I only work in one community. I have 25 schools. So I don't know the pressures that someone might get in a different corner of the state, but the rules are the same for everybody and the expectations are the same for everybody.
Well, I think just putting those things out there, especially if you put some parents' skin in the game, they may be less likely to want to do it, right? I mean,
that's right.
At the very least, there's a deterrent now where you're like, I don't know, because if I do this, I may end up jeopardizing my own child's athletic career.
Absolutely. I mean, they have to sign. They're going to have to sign an athletic questionnaire in FCPS. This will be a new thing, right? In order to help us collect the documents, we have thousands of kids that transfer. We will have an athletic questionnaire the parents will fill out. They will be attesting that none of these conditions that are de facto athletic motive exist. And lying on a document you supply to the school division will most certainly have consequences to a kid, right? So we hope none of our parents would put their kids in that situation.
Right.
Does and this is a good time of year to ask this, since the new year starts July 1st.
Yeah.
So people be grandfathered in. How does that work?
Yeah, so our DSAs will tell you one of the words I will never use in terms of rules is grandfathering, right? Because we grandfather stuff and then we forget that they're grandfathered, and then we forget to address it, and then we don't have conditions, and everybody says, well, I'm just like them, so why don't I do it? There's no grandfathering of anybody. But in the Virginia High School Handbook, it already exists. Once you establish eligibility at a school, you remain eligible at the school. Right. So if a kid got in under less scrutiny a year ago and they stay continuously enrolled in that school, they will remain eligible in that school. So yes, there are some kids that attending schools that maybe they shouldn't be attending today, but they're eligible anyway. And I'm going to give you an example, non-specific one. We have had kids that have been in a school pyramid from elementary to middle to high, and it's not until late in their high school career that we realize they don't even live here. But they are eligible, right? Now, we might, as a division, decide they need to go because they haven't paid tuition for 9 years. But eligibility-wise, they're still eligible. So, yes, kids that are currently eligible today are not negatively impacted by this new microscope on future transfers.
Okay, wow. Well, I got to give you credit. You answered. I mean, we asked a lot of questions so far, and Tom, hit them out of the park.
I appreciate it. It's not like I haven't been practicing, right?
Wow. And I'm impressed by the way it's written, and the fact that, one of the things I thought coming into this, I thought FCPS maybe kind of, had its own twist on some things, but apparently not. So, I mean, I think that's pretty good.
I want to tell you that the job of leadership, and whether I am one or am not one, I am in a position to provide that sort of guidance to schools. So what will be different for FCPS is that we do have a central office, and our schools should feel supported in making these tough decisions and vetting all these documents and collecting all these documents. So that will be a change for us, in that the central office will have a very active role in every transfer that exists. And again, there'll be thousands. When you talk about all the program transfers and language and AP and military installations and all the things that we get in the division our size, our office will see and touch every single one. And that is a change. And it's not designed to provide a gotcha or an oversight. It's support, because this is a difficult task. And our school-based people have been pulled in very different directions over the last 25 years, and the amount of responsibilities they have. And, an athletic director like me in 1996 had nothing to do but check eligibility, right? Our student activities directors are very different positions than they were 30 years ago. So the change is that the division will support our people in doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Can I ask you, I guess, one more question about sort of the rules and that kind of thing, and we're going to kind of move on.
Yeah.
Was NIL stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious if that's something that you guys, it's a conversation, I'm sure, and then how that it might impact coaches down the road. Like if I were to, again, let's say I'm coaching a high school basketball team, and how does that, can I facilitate, the local, restaurant down the road, kind of promoting, Joe Schmo on my team, that kind of thing. I mean, is there, you guys start to talk about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we have. And the Virginia rule is written with the most conservative leaning it could have, in the sense that we give the authority to kids. I mean, we're not jeopardizing kids' amateur status for having an NIL deal, but it's still written to prohibit schools from utilizing it as a recruiting or marketing tactic. So currently the Virginia High School League NIL rule prohibits coaches or anyone associated with the school, including boosters, from facilitating NIL deals. So a coach who, will go back to our trainer, AAU travel program provider, would need to be really careful. I'm going to give you an example. Like if you have an AAU program and 4 of the kids are your high school kids and 14 are not your kids, you can do a lot for those 14 who are not your kids in the AAU space in terms of bringing deals to their table, but you can't do anything for the 4 that are yours under the current Virginia High School League rule. But I can tell you that space is changing consistently, right? We have cases in federal courts at the college level, which ultimately drive what happens at decisions at the high school level. So I would suggest that we'll operate under the current rule and do the best we can with again, we've committed no resources to training kids and parents on this yet. We've created no resources for training our coaches on how to do this yet, partly because we don't want the coaches involved in it because the rules prohibit it. But it's an area of growth. We absolutely need to get better at educating our kids and parents on what NIL means in the Virginia high school space, because it's not the same as the Power 5 college football space, right? And I mean, colleges, as you guys both know, like they're using it to bring kids to their school. In fact, they're negotiating deals before the kid ever enrolls. Right? How much are we going to give? We got $4 million for a quarterback. It's not going to be enough. That is not the education-based model that exists in Virginia today, and the rules are pretty tight today. So kids can have NIL deals, but the coaches can't facilitate that stuff today. But again, I reserve that will be a shifting landscape, and candidly, probably the 3 of us will be out of education before it ever really settles. I mean, it's just new. And at FCPS, we, the league requires students with NIL deals to submit paperwork to the league. It's more of they just want to know what's going on out there, right? Sort of to monitor, if you got 30 all coming from one community, you might look into it and say, how are these all being facilitated? And if our schools are doing it right, and that's an if, and it's not because they're being malicious, and if they're not doing it, it's just new. But if they're doing it right, I mean, we have very few kids making very few real dollars through NIL in Fairfax County. We have a few who make some money, but we don't have a lot of kids making a lot of money. So right now, it's a space I think we can navigate without too many outside pressures changing our mission and our values and things. But we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, you had a lot of things on your plate, this calendar year before you worried about the NIL stuff.
It's number it's 904 on our project list. If I was screen sharing, I could show you the list. But
right. And the big issue would be boosters, anyways. I think you're right. That would be the biggest, probably, right? Would be the school boosters. And, so as long as you're keeping them away, then I think you'd be fine.
Yeah.
So to switch gears a little bit, I've been really fascinated talking about the transfer stuff, but next thing we want to talk about is kind of district and possibly redistricting, because not just inside FCPS, but we keep on hearing that Loudoun's exploding, that Loudoun schools are slowly creeping into 6A.
Yeah.
Has there been preliminary talks so far about, because we've heard Light Ridge may end up going up to 6A? I know Independence
is up.
Have there been preliminary talks about possibly redistricting, how that would work?
Yeah,
because Independence just switched, right? They just switched with
Freedom.
With Freedom, right? Freedom, that was kind of a swap.
Yeah. That's right. The redistricting and reclassification in Virginia is a little bit like a middle school dance where you're not really sure where you're going to be really end up, but you're going to investigate all the options, but you're not going to tell anybody that you're investigating those options, because if you put yourself out there and it doesn't work out, you're not going to feel good about yourself. Yeah. So that's what's happening right now, is that those schools that are anticipating being moved either up or down are reaching out to groups that already exist in those classifications and saying, would we get a unanimous vote? Would we get like a half vote? Like where could we fit if we get placed? Because the Virginia R&R classification process is really membership driven, right? There's a committee together. Those committee members represent the schools. It's not VHSL staff that places them. It's a committee of school representatives that decide on the best placement. And generally the best path for that is unanimity, right? If 6 schools get together and say, hey, we want to be a district, and nobody else objects, then those 6 schools are going to be a district, right? That's the way it's the path of least resistance, and it creates the best outcome. So that's a good thing. So that's where we are right now, right? So we have a 2-year cycle coming. This year's March numbers will generate a plan from the high school league that we should see next winter. And then that next winter plan will have a full year and a half of appeals and reviews before it goes into effect in 27, 28. So 25, 26 and 26, 27 are what it is right now. And it will not change. So our 4 districts in our area, the classification, of Lewis and Mount Vernon being 6A, all of that exists today, and it will exist for 2 years. But we will absolutely try to stay involved in all those dance conversations, so that should there be a shift of multiple schools that have to go somewhere, and I know our football coaches are aware of this. I know you guys are aware of it, but maybe some of our listeners aren't. Region B in 6A has 19 schools, and Region A has 9 schools.
Right.
And the current trend is for Loudoun schools that bounce to be in Region B. Well, if several bounce at one time, like Light Ridge joins Independence, they're going to hit 20, and the other region's still going to be at 9. So I think there will be pressure on that R&R committee to create some balance, and that's where our folks come into play, because we have one region with 13 and one with 16, and another region's got 20 now, and that region with 13 starts to look like a target for folks to join, right? But like, hey, this looks better than going to 20. So it's like I'm not saying Independence and Light Ridge are doing this, but they're doing it, right? They're reaching out and going, would we like to be in the Concord to maybe not create a 21 school region, but to create a 15 school region? They're absolutely making those inroads right now to see how that would fit. So just kind of looking at numbers, and I do think Loudoun's sort of outpacing their opening a new school all the time. So I do think the most likely scenario is that Independence and Light Ridge are both 6A come 27, 28. And if they both needed a place to go, it's very possible that Region B loses some people to either Region A, which is not great, right? That's tough. That's a long way from Stafford to Virginia Beach. But again, I came from George Mason. You guys know where that is, and you know who they play, and you know how far we travel. And our region went from Washington, D.C. to West Virginia to the North Carolina, Tennessee line. Like, that's a region, right? We shouldn't be scared of a region that big, because you only go there once a year, right? It's not a big deal. But if they do want balance, and they're worried about geography, then the easier solution would be to include our 29 in a different math. And again, that assumes we have 29. And, I mentioned Lewis and Mount Vernon's numbers are not 6A numbers, right? Those schools made an elective choice to stay 6A the last time R&R came around. The division won't mandate what those schools want to do. Principals, DSAs, coaches should be having community conversations about what's best for that school. And if those schools choose to play down, then we actually might see 2 more Loudon schools replace them, because if they don't elect to play up, the line shifts, right? So I guess the short answer to, as you've learned, I don't have a whole lot of short answers, so I apologize. Again,
it's okay.
You have to pay overtime for your Zoom service. But the short answer is that we will be involved in all of the discussions about 6A. If we have schools that are choosing to play down, then we'll get involved in discussions about where they go. But it's way too early to predict, because we're just starting a 2-year cycle. And until the Virginia High School League and the VDOE release the March numbers, we can't even play with the numbers yet. So, there's definitely a nostalgia for the old Northern region where everybody was part of one group, but that is not going to happen. And then you may have heard the other possibility is to kind of just reshuffle our 29. I've heard that too. I don't know what the value in that is. Maybe it's just freshness, right? Which is a possibility. And then I've heard the other thing with but another option, which would be to parcel out our 29 beyond more than just 4 districts. So as a for instance, if we got more than 2 schools that had to come to us, we don't have any districts that have room for more than 2, right? We conveniently have 2 spots in the Concord, which would make that an 8-team district, which is palatable. But we don't have any place to put anybody else. Like, you couldn't put any schools in the Patriot without it becoming burdensome, right? Once you go to 9, you're sort of overutilizing the regular season schedule for district play. You make tournaments really hard. They got to get complicated with brackets. So I think our preference will always be to keep it to 8 as a max, keep it above 4 as a minimum. But any configuration between those numbers, 4 and 8, are a possibility. Because you guys remember the days when it was a 4-team district into a region, and it worked great. Everybody loved it. And now we're at 2-team district, 2 districts feeding the region. So there's room for creativity. It'll be interesting over the next 6-7 months which coaches and DSAs really put on their creative hats and say, what's the solution? First of all, I think we have to identify if there is a problem, right? But besides balance. But if we identify a problem, then what are the solutions that are out there? And then it becomes sort of politicking to get unanimity, right? We got to get our neighbors and everybody we're leaving out to join us. I'm sure that some folks from Meridian and Falls Church City watch this podcast as well. They're in a far different situation, right? They're the only 3A school, within 28 miles. So R&R has a tremendous impact on them. I mean, they could get shifted, they could get moved, or they could stay where they are, which is not great either, right? So every school around the state who's on that bubble or that threshold of might be moved is really stressing. Our folks have the advantage of it's what's best for us, right? Like we're kind of comfortable, but if we can make it better, then we should explore it.
Yeah, I think I know, like you said, it's kind of a bummer to have to drive a little bit, but Mesa's always tough. And by the way, I hear about Region B every morning from Mesa. The first thing he texts me every morning is, man, Region B, there's too many teams in that. And for 3 years, I've been getting the same text from Mesa every morning. He's all over it. But in California, and I know a lot of other towns and a lot of other states, that's the norm. It's just having to do a hefty drive. And most of America, I mean, that's really what it is. So I don't think it's the end of the world. And I'm speaking for poor Stafford right now, and some of them by saying that. I'm not the one driving, but they love me out there, so it's all good. I mean, it's not like it's a great drive coming, the best drive going the other way, anyways. But it'd be a little more of a drive, but that's just what it is, I think. Especially if the trade off is some teams that are 6 and 4 make the playoffs. I mean, that to me that would be the other thing if they. They'd have more teams. They had some really good teams not making the playoffs over there because of that large region.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that the membership of the Virginia High School League lost its way after 6 classes, but the membership of the high school league lost its way after 6 classes. I was tasked with presenting to the membership the problem that existed in Virginia, and we talked about. That was when we were in the old division days, and we had a Division I football champion who had more kids than the Division II football champion. Like that make sense somehow, right? Like, so we addressed the problems by creating 6 classifications, but the premise behind those was balance between groupings. So each class was balanced. So remember back in the day, people could elect to play up, and we had 127 3A schools. So we were dividing, 3A into Division 6 and Division 5, but we were dividing with 127 schools, right? Which left the other classes with less schools. And then we had some regions that were very big, and we had some regions that were not very big. So it was balance first. Like that was the incentive. That was the reason we were moving. And then geography was a second, which means that we did the best we could, but we acknowledged that competitive balance among districts and regions and classes was more important than geography. And somehow in just 12 years or so, we have lost that mission. And maybe it's time to reevaluate. Maybe balance isn't the primary driver anymore. Maybe geography is the primary driver, but let's acknowledge that in the next classification system if we need to, and create a grouping that meets the objective. And right now we don't have balance, and that was the objective of going to 6 classes. So probably needs to be evaluated.
All right. So, Mason, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm good.
I'll get your text. I'll get your text in the morning about the.
I do think Region B is terrible. I think last year it was Patriot, right? Patriot lost 2 games and went from being probably the 1 seed to possibly being out of the playoffs just by having 2 losses.
Yeah. Again, and think about where they're located, right? Easy fix, put them in the Concord. Now they're in a region with 14, and everything changes because again, right. With major decisions like this in Virginia, this is one of the difficulties with getting anything passed in Virginia. If it's going to affect 318 schools, getting people on board is hard. But in order to get 318 schools on board with anything, you got to have an objective first, right? But if we're all out there saying R&R is supposed to suit me, then we're never going to get 318 people on board. But we could all get behind balance between regions. Like we might be able to get 317 of the 318 to say the most important thing is balance between regions. And we accept all the consequences that come with that objective. 100%. But we haven't put a fine point on it in Virginia in a few years, though.
It sounds like they're on their path.
Yeah, I look forward to that. That'll be kind of fun to see what everyone decides to do there with the, mixing it up or balancing or however you guys decide to do that. All right. Well, welcome back. Once again, I think he answered everything that you needed to know about, what's recruiting and what's not.
Yeah. Really, really good information out there. Also really good information on what the future of the districts may look like. I mean, really fascinating. And he did say he'd like to take in opinions from people on how this is all going to work. Yeah, it should be interesting. I mean, who knows? It could be a brand new look Concord. It could be a brand new look Patriot. It could be a brand new look Region B.
You imagine you throw like Patriot Battlefield into
Concord.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's freaking. I mean, that's talking about shaking things up.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
No,
those are some battles. So like good stuff. They're a couple years away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great information. And once again, he didn't flinch.
Nope, not at all. Can't prepare.
The consummate professional didn't flinch, stood in the batter's box. You gave him your best Dennis Eckersley, and he freaking took it out of the park. He looked like Kirk Gibson hitting it out of the park.
A good student comes in prepared for class.
He was prepared.
Does it come in, look through his backpack, trying to find the papers? Oh, I think the paper is somewhere in here. I don't know. No, he knew he had his trapper keeper, open his folder up. There it all was, ready to go.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. So yeah, I mean, good stuff again. And thanks to Tom for coming on and answering all these questions. He was an awesome guest. It was great to have him. We'll probably see him again in August, talking about, some of our preseason predictions.
Yeah, but wait, you can't end on a sequel. You got to have a trilogy, right?
You got to have a trilogy. And Rocky 3 was a good one. We'll get into that next, my friend.
Yes, we will.
So thanks for joining us for this part 2 of these very special episodes here on All Hitches. Part 2, part 3 might be coming. So tune in.
Right now we are flying away in the Millennium Falcon as Luke and Leia look on, right?
That's right. So we'll see you guys soon on All Hitches.
See ya.